It's Sharon here from Content Sparks, and we are ready to go live. Just launched something today, the QuickStart Podcast Playbook. And instead of going into detail into that course, I'm going to talk more about some of the challenges of teaching online live. And I know you guys have had experience with this as well. And if I head over to my screen, what I'm doing today is I've set up my slides in Canva. So I'm kind of demoing things. This is really demoing a live stream versus a formal getting into a Zoom group, like a Zoom call, which I think is easier for teaching live if you have smaller groups because you can see people and you see, all those grids. I think most people have been on a Zoom call by this point. So I think Zoom is better for that kind of interactive teaching of a course. But I'm doing it with slides here using StreamYard to teach this sort of thing live. And the reason I am just showing you this screen is to try to prevent some of the tech problems that I had last time because it can drain resources. Normally, you can go up into this little present tab. If you can see, my arrow isn't really showing, but on the upper right, there's something that says present, and you can share your whole screen. I also always use two monitors as well. So, top 7 challenges of teaching online. One of the things I hear often from our customers is that the whole idea of teaching online is just too much. Even recording video sometimes is just too much getting on camera. But you can do it. And we're going to go through tips of different challenges. And you can start by recording video. That is how I started, and then start diving into doing some live stuff. Sometimes now I prefer the live because video is all the setup and recording, and then you feel you have to edit it, and it's not as relaxed necessarily. So live, you can make some mistakes, people understand it. So let's go through all these challenges. There are 7 that I'm going to go through. So technical difficulties. This is the thing I think that holds back most people is that worry about tech. That and then how you look and how you sound but the worry of something going wrong. And it happens. So the first thing you should acknowledge is it happens and it will happen. And it's good to have a backup plan if you can. If you can have a co-host, that's great too. Most people starting out don't have that. Might have an assistant who can come on and take over. But the main thing is to first test everything. That doesn't mean it'll all work, but you test it. You test your internet connection, try to be wired in. And I said a note here, minimize extra resource drains. This is really critical. That's one of the reasons I'm just sharing my screen today with my Canvas slides rather than doing it into present, because I want to show other tabs as well on my screen. And everything you open up is going to be another drain on your resources on the internet. So try to minimize that, reboot your computer before you start. These are all, simple things. And do a trial run, maybe with a friend. Or when I did my first live stream, I did it to myself as a private one on Facebook. You can do that too, just to see what it looks like. Same with the Zoom. You can go on and make it a meeting just with yourself and you can see how it goes, but ideally with someone else so they can see what it's like on the other end. And also, if you tell people in advance what to prepare. So if you're teaching a series of live classes, send out an email and tell them exactly what to prepare. If you have a co-host, get on a good 20 minutes beforehand to make sure all the tech is working. I always do that when I have a guest or I'm a guest on something. We get on beforehand because inevitably there is some issue. The microphone's not working. I'm getting feedback through their speakers. There's always something. So make sure that students know what kind of equipment they have to have. Make sure, hopefully, the landscaper isn't outside. You don't have the noise in the background. Test that all out. And also communicate with people right from the beginning what they can do for troubleshooting. This is why it's great if you can have an assistant or someone moderating in the background because they can go in the comments and tell people what to do. The most common one is to just refresh your screen. That's what I said in the very beginning. And I already know that from experience. That's something that works. You can tell them to refresh their screen, and usually they can come back on or go out and come back in again. And I made a note here too that you can always combine video with a live Q&A. This is a very low stress way to get into some sort of teaching online, getting comfortable with that. You can say with one of our courses, take the slides, however you want to do them in PowerPoint or import them to Canva or somewhere else. Record your little videos that you drip out one by one, and every single day or whatever schedule makes sense, send it out, tell people, watch this, do the work, and then have a live Q&A. And that's your first easy, low stress way to get into some sort of teaching, because you're just getting on, preferably in a Zoom of some sort, and answering questions. If something goes wrong, you can always reschedule it. It's not a big deal. I definitely recommend that as one way to get started, because people don't necessarily have to listen to you teach it online if it's a certain concept step by step. They can watch it and then come back. I'm in a course now where I'm learning how to use Descript, that AI video tool, which is awesome so far. And he's teaching some stuff live, but he has the recordings, and then we come back in and ask questions. So I watched some stuff yesterday. I recorded our sales page video where I went in and I showed everything in the materials for this podcasting course we released. And there are a couple things that came up that I wouldn't have been able to ask about necessarily live, because I needed to go off and do stuff first. That's the tech side. And I can go on, but that's the main thing. Managing distractions is another thing that is incredibly difficult in this day and age. If somebody is really eager to learn, they will be willing to turn off all the distractions. If someone isn't engaged, then you're going to have more trouble. So you always want to keep them engaged, encourage them at the very beginning, do your housekeeping to close out all the tabs, close their door, grab a cup of coffee, because that's not distracting to drink. And tell them to turn off notifications, which most people forget to do, even if they mean to, and set some clear guidelines for the chat. For example, I've told you to drop comments and stuff in the chat as we go if you have questions, because I'm prepared to answer those at different points, and it's good to stop throughout and answer them so that people don't get distracted by the chat. I'm sure you've been in a Zoom or some sort of class before where you see the chat going crazy. Well, people aren't listening to you if they're busy chatting. But tell people, hey, I will stop to answer questions at a certain point, and then stop periodically. And also plan to share your slides. So something like this, I can share these slides for you guys if you want it afterwards. It's easy enough for me to print them out in a PDF and share them. But that way, people aren't taking screenshots or writing things down the whole time if they know that they're going to get those slides. And if you're doing some sort of online course platform where you're going to put the videos afterwards, you just print those slides and make them a download as well. So managing distractions, I said the slides, encourage people to turn their notifications off, close tabs, close doors, set guidelines, all that sort of thing. And that is number 2, challenge number 2. We're moving along. Challenge number 3, which is another one that is for teaching live online. We're talking about teaching live online, not in person in a classroom, which is very different. Limited interaction and engagement. This is really an issue for pretty much any type of online, no matter how interesting it is. You can prepare icebreakers, questions, polls, short activities to do live, all that sort of thing. Show them up on the screen. If you're teaching something like our new podcasting course, you can generate a whole bunch of questions. This is where ChatGPT and all those tools can come in really handy, because you can give it, say, one module of the course and ask it for ideas for icebreakers or polls or questions that you can ask. And half the stuff you won't be able to use, but a lot of it will get your brain working. So you can get some icebreakers together. Often you'll see people asking, "Where are you from? What's your name?" All that different stuff. I don't like the ones where people say, "Oh, if I can show you how to make $10,000 in one day, are you on board? Do you want to hear that? Tell me. Yes, yes, yes." These sort of no-brainer, obvious questions that people are just saying it in order to get someone to do some thumbs up in the chat. Personally, I don't like that. I know a lot of people use it. A lot of people who are famous, the gurus who teach online use that. I would rather have a question like a general, where are you from? What's your biggest challenge? A poll. Are you a beginner, an intermediate, more advanced? Have you ever used this tool before? If it's podcasting, have you ever tried to do a podcast? Do you enjoy listening to podcasts? Little things that are just going to get some interaction, easy to answer, and maybe give you some feedback as well. Those are great to do and spread them out throughout your whole presentation. Breakout rooms is another thing. I have not tried this yet, but I know I have customers who have done it. For instance, I have one customer who is in the Netherlands, and he does sales training with salespeople. And what he does is use breakout rooms. In Zoom, you can do breakout rooms where you assign people. If you go to Zoom and you have it something like this open, you can't see the thing on the bottom, but there's something for breakout rooms. You can open it up and specify a number of breakout rooms and have it assigned manually. And there's a whole thing where you can assign people the rooms, you can do it manually, automatically. You can go into each room to check on people and answer questions. You can set a timer where everyone automatically comes back to the main room when you're ready. This customer does it where they practice their sales skills with in pairs in those rooms. They've had this feature for a while, and that's a really good one to do. So try that out. And if you need to, I would go through the tutorials on that to make sure you're comfortable with it. Zoom has a whole bunch of those. You can just go into their learning center. It's one of the things on the top when you're in your Zoom, and you'll see there's in-meeting navigation using breakout rooms and breakout room pre-assign. You can pre-assign as well. That's something I highly recommend that you try and do, that you give a try to. Maybe do it as a practice session with a few people or really good customers or something like that who you can try it out with. Give them a little assignment, like a topic to discuss. And then you can try that out in a class, an online class where you give them one of the short assignments. I wouldn't do anything long, but you can do shorter things. If it's something longer, then you're going to want to break it up and have them come back for a Q&A the next day or a couple days later. Also, you can schedule one-on-one or group virtual office hours. That's kind of what I was talking about before, where you can have a recorded video and then have a Q&A. But if you do a live class, you can also schedule something afterwards, like one-on-one for very small groups so that you are engaging and answering people's questions. You could do it via email as well and say, hey, I'm done, our time's up. But as you do it, if you have any questions, just email me. And that way you can get people moving on that stuff and keep them engaged. And all the things I talked about before with the icebreakers and the questions and polls. Work on that because it's always going to be hard to get interaction no matter what. Time management is another. I have a really tough time with this because I want to answer everybody's questions. And even though I prepare stuff, I always think of something else as I go. So you need to set some clear times to start and end, especially as people are managing their schedule. For instance, now I know I have to finish in 40 minutes. That's how much time I have left, maximum, preferably less, because I have another call after this. Other people are going to be in the same situation. They set up meetings and then they have to leave before you're done and they didn't get to hear everything. That's the kind of thing where you can set the timer, keep your clock in front of you. Usually it's right there on the screen, depending on the app. I can see right in StreamYard in my upper left-hand corner where it says live and it says how long I've been on. And you usually have a clock. That shouldn't be that difficult, but if you can plan in advance your agenda and say, this is how long I'm going to spend on each thing, then it'll help you with your time. And once you've done it once, if it's a class you're doing more than once, you'll see where you didn't get the timing right and you can adjust it. The more you do it, the more feedback you're going to get. Also, if you're doing something where different people are talking, the second point here is give individuals set time for speaking and take longer questions offline or for the next session. This is one of the hardest things to do in any kind of group coaching, group mastermind sessions. You might have no one who wants to talk or everyone who wants to talk. And then you feel you have to go through all of them. You want to set and say, okay, 5 minutes each person. And if there's somebody who has a question that's particularly long, detailed, you can say, hey, I can't cover that all here. And it's perfectly fine to admit that. Can't give it all here, but let's talk about it in the next session. Or let's talk about it in the group, in the community, and have a bigger discussion there. So don't let one person take over the whole thing. Another thing you can do for that, for the discussion and people going over, is say, okay, submit your questions in advance. Those people you're going to cover first in any questions. And if there's time, I'll cover others. I've done that before. That works out really well because often people don't submit the questions in advance. So those that do are going to get the advantage of actually having their questions answered. And then you go through what you can and you say, okay, we're done now. Hang on to your questions. We'll answer them next time, or we'll answer them in the group. And that encourages them to also submit them in advance the next time too. Schedule breaks to avoid burnout. That's really most important for something that's a longer session. If you've ever been on one of these full day conferences, an all day online training, you have to have breaks. I would say no more than an hour at a time. That's typical for most people. And then give them half an hour break. Or it could be less depending on how long it's going to be, but half an hour gives someone a time to go get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, pull themselves together, take care of a few emails. And if you can, keep the live stream or whatever it is open so that you have maybe some music playing in the background and people know it's still there. They don't just completely forget about you and you're gone. And then you can announce it. I was in one session where somebody had a countdown clock on the screen as well. So you knew when it was going to be up and then make some sort of announcement. So always try and do that as well. It'll help people stay focused. The next one, number 5, is ensuring accessibility. Accessibility can mean a lot of different things. It's actually being able to consume it, being able to access it, things like captions as well. So there's actually being able to get to the stuff, like, is it online in a portal? Can I see the recordings, the transcripts? But it's also accessible for people who maybe can't see the screen as well or can't hear as well. You need to make sure you have multiple modes of learning in there, even when it's live. Don't just leave it for a recording or a transcript. Try and do, and also have captions for audio. I can do that in the recording using this new tool, Descript. It's actually not a new tool. It's been around for a while, but I just started playing with it yesterday. You can just put a video in there. It'll transcribe it and you can put the captions on. Really, really simple. And you can edit it, just editing in the text. It's super simple. But you can do that with live as well. Some things automatically put it on. I believe Facebook automatically does it as well. But then provide the transcript, provide the recordings, make sure that I said don't rely on visuals when teaching. Normally, we always say have visuals, have visuals. It's really important to do that. A model, a graphic, something, but don't just have the visuals because otherwise someone who maybe can't hear as well is just looking at the visual and doesn't really know what's going on. Or maybe they have their sound turned way down because they're somewhere where they can't have it on or they don't have earphones. Always trying to scribe so they can hear vocally, someone who can't see as well, and also have some text, some notes, which you'll hand out also. So it's good to always use different modes of learning. Schedule sessions well ahead of time for planning. This is important if you're doing, say, a series as well. An off the cuff live stream, hey, we're going to have a Q&A. You can't always do well in advance, but something where there's a series where someone's buying one of your courses, tell them what the dates are going to be, tell them when the replays will be ready, that kind of thing, where they can access it, all of that stuff so they can plan it out because there's always going to be some conflict. And also be aware of time zones. Most of your customers are on the East Coast of the US. You might be doing it midday, that sort of time, but maybe late enough so that people on the West Coast can watch, but also not too late so that if there are people in the UK, they can watch. It's always a juggling act. Or some people deliver a session twice at 2 different times. If you have that big an audience, that's a lot more work, but if you're charging a lot for your course, that can work well too. The next one, balancing lecture and activity time. Now, this is something that's an issue both for the live online teaching and the in-person. If you're doing a session like a VIP retreat or just a seminar at a meetup, that kind of thing, you do need to try and balance things out or you lose people's attention. We're not doing activities in this, but if you're teaching something in particular, like one of the courses, you can break it up with things like the polls, but you can also break it up with other types of quizzes and activities. I would not go more than a few minutes at a time if you have a group where you can interact, something like on a Zoom, where you talk for maybe 5-10 minutes, and then you ask a question, ask a poll, get people to do something. If you have specific activities, like in one of our courses where there's a question they have to do, you can stop it. And that's my third point on this slide here. You can give a set time and say, okay, take 5 minutes now and brainstorm topics for your next podcast or your next live stream or your next video tutorial, whatever it is. And then we're going to come back in 5 minutes and share. And if you can put a timer on the screen, even better. There are all sorts of apps. And if you're sharing your screen like this, you could just put a clock, put a countdown timer right up on the screen, and then have some background music playing. And then say, okay, time's up. Let's come back and have a discussion about it and ask them questions, get people to share. And people will do that. If it's something short and fun, you can do that. If it's something intense, it'll be harder. But I've been in sessions like this where you go and you practice with something, you do brainstorming, you do a little search online, you look at your analytics, any types of short things that they can do are really great to break things up. And of course, be flexible, adjust things if you have to. You can always add another session. If something's just taking way too long, to say, you know what, we're going to stop here and pick it up again tomorrow. And that way you also know for the next time you teach it, just what worked and what didn't. That was challenge number 6. And that brings us to number 7, building a sense of community. I have a general community. And I also have my insiders group, which is for customers. And one of the challenges there is that you've got to be posting regularly, and it isn't people who have all come in at the same time. So when you're doing a course, a specific course, or even a challenge, it's really great to have a community that's just for that, what's called a cohort group. So the people who are all going through it at the same time. And you can have it just open for that period of time that the course is available. Or say you're giving them 3 months, it's manageable for you as well. But it also motivates people to do all the work because, the group's going to close. But you can build that community by having people go back in and say, okay, they finished day one, post this, that, and the other, post a little video, comment on what you did, share a screenshot of the work you just did, share your biggest question, your biggest takeaway. You can have hashtags, all those sorts of things. If you're doing it as a cohort group, where everyone's going through at the same time, that will build a better sense of community and people will share their challenges. And you'll see people form relationships and end up networking and making other friends and connections. And when you're running that, encourage people to introduce themselves, share their interests, their backgrounds, what industry they're in, what their biggest challenge is. And that way people can see who they can relate to also and connect with them. Facebook is still the easiest one to do this on. I mean, it's just we're having this discussion somewhere in another session. Maybe it was the last one that I did here on doing a standout course that Facebook, face it. It still is the easiest because people are on it and the threads work and these separate communities you can log into, but it's much tougher to get people logging in and commenting and adding stuff. So if you're okay with Facebook and your audience is on there, just have a short-term community. 3 months, course is up, give them something every day, send an email every day reminding them. That's all stuff you can automate. You can just set up to look every day at your Facebook and answer things. And also, you can provide opportunities for students to collaborate and work together. That can be a little tougher and depends on how big your group is. If you have a smaller group where you get to know everybody, you can match them up. Or you could, in your community, have people message each other based on what their interests are, but that's going to be tougher because you might have people who don't get matched up with someone. That's the kind of thing where maybe you could do your Zoom breakout room where you've done activities in there and match people up and then tell them, okay, you guys are now a pair or matched up, connect offline for the next activity. And that will start building that and then share in the group or share on the next live Q&A. So you try and replicate what you would do in person. The tech is not quite there, but it's almost there where you can do that kind of thing. And then when you come back to a live session, people can present. You could have two people even presenting at the same time what they worked on. That'll build some community. And the more you can get that discussion going. But really, my number one tip is to practice. There's no getting around it. The more you get on and try these sorts of things, get onto a live stream like this and get some activity. We're a small group today because I'm doing it at a different time with not as much advance notice. In order to get more people on live, you need to, and this is from experience, you need to send out enough emails in advance, motivate people by telling them what you're going to be talking about, send reminders 2 days before, day of, an hour before. That all gets a lot more people on. And something like this live stream, I never get as many people as when I use Zoom or a webinar platform. But the benefit of the live stream is it is that casual. I can multi-stream to different places. I did say I was going to show you StreamYard and what that looks like. It's going to look a little weird when I put this over on my screen because it's two different screens. But if I put this over here to my other monitor, this is just because, I've got everything going together, so it goes into infinity. But I'm looking at my second monitor, which is where I always share stuff, which is why I'm looking away. And you can see in here that over on the right, this is what I'm looking at as I'm doing my live stream. I see the time going. I've got a thing for banners, so I can add banners all in advance. I can show There's the link for podcasting. I can go back and see comments and show a comment on the screen. So any questions, this all makes it much easier, more interactive. I can have a private chat if I have, say, a co-host and there's some sort of problem. My own branding I have set up and banners. So that's what this looks like. So that's everything I was going to cover today. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Would love to hear your feedback, what you guys have done before with teaching live online, if it's something that you want to do, you've been hesitant to do, whether these tips were helpful. And then grab the course. Let me know what you think of it, because this was one that a lot of people want. And you can also use it to be starting your own podcast if you wanted to, if that's something that interests you and that's something that your audience would be interested in. Signing off, guys. Take care, and I will talk to you soon. Bye now.